The High Court of South Africa, the Gauteng Division, has ruled that former National Commissioner of Correctional Services, Arthur Fraser's decision to place former President Jacob Zuma on medical parole was unlawful. We're joined now by Mr. Niehaus. Mr. Niehaus, thank you so much for making the time to speak to us. We saw you posting yesterday with the former president's latest, or his book, detailing some of the events in his life that seemed like a good moment for you. Did you know at that time, did you have any inkling, any indication of what was coming?
Well, obviously, we wouldn't have had an inkling, because that decision by the Gauteng High Court was conveyed, communicated today. It is, I must emphasize, an outrageous judgment. A judgment that just reflects once again that our legal system and our courts are captured. What we have here was an illegal imprisonment of President Jacob Zuma without a trial. He was placed on parole through a very proper process. And now we have this judgment by the Gauteng High Court, which is known as the worst possible court in terms of its judgments and its rulings also against President Jacob Zuma. He's lost 100% of all his appeals and court cases in that court. And I would like to call on every South African to oppose this unjust returning of President Zuma to jail, this rescinding of his medical parole, and we cannot accept this. This is utterly unacceptable. It is gross injustice towards President Zuma, and evidently, Lady Justice has now thrown down her scales, removed her blindfold, and is piercing President Zuma with the spear that she has, which was supposed to be that sword for justice and fighting for justice, which is now being used for factional political purposes. As you can hear, I'm very angry about what is happening now. I'm very angry about the continuation of injustice that is being perpetrated against President Zuma, and the manner in which our legal system is now being compromised and abused for factional political purposes.
The decision says Mr. Arthur Fraser's decision was unlawful. What have you got to say to that?
Well, as I've indicated to you, everything was very properly done by Mr. Arthur Fraser during the time that he was the Commissioner of Correctional Services. The decision was based on President Zuma's medical condition. And I must hasten to add that we've seen the unseemly situation where President Zuma's medical records were leaked, where there were attempts to compromise his most private medical information. There's one abuse after the other that plays itself out against President Zuma. And we as South African citizens who believe in justice, who believe in fair-mindedness and that there cannot be selective justice, now have to stand up and be counted in our opposition to this utter outrage.
So, have you had a chance to speak to the former president? Do you know what he's thinking, how he's feeling at this time? Mr. Niehaus, are you still with us?
My apologies, I couldn't hear you because the sound is breaking up.
We did have a small freeze there. I was just asking if you've had the chance to speak to former President Jacob Zuma and if we know what he's feeling like and what his responses are to this development.
No, I haven't had a chance yet to speak to President Zuma, but obviously one would assume, and I think quite correctly assume, that he would be deeply distraught and disturbed by this continuation of him being persecuted by our legal system, a legal system which now clearly has been compromised to the point where we are living with a dictatorship of our courts, and our courts being in the service of factional political vendettas that were being fought against President Zuma. This is an outrage of the worst kind. And I repeat once again, we as law-abiding and peace-loving South Africans should fight this terrible decision and this kind of vindictiveness against President Zuma to the hilt. We cannot tolerate it, and we must use every possible peaceful and legal means to oppose it and to fight again for our justice system to be returning to a position where it can be said that it serves all the people of South Africa on an equal basis. At the moment, that cannot be said. We've got a justice system that is now fully captured for factional political purposes. And the Gauteng North High Court is a prime example of that outrage that us as South Africans, and specifically people like President Jacob Zuma, are suffering at their hands.
Thanks for talking to us this morning, Mr. Niehaus.